open discussion review of everything. So definitely let us know. Also, can you guys hear me? I just had a connection pop up, show up on my side.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Making sure I didn't just lose everybody. All right. So on the goals page, and I do have the Miro pulled up somewhere. I have the Miro pulled up of the getting started assessment, all the pages. So we can jump in here if we have any questions as we're going through this. But we're looking at the page that of the Getting Started assessment that kind of goes over their goals. And one of the questions we wanted to ask is when you reach your employment or education training goals, what would be different for you? 43% said yes, 31 were not sure, 25 said no. And this is one of those motivation questions that we pulled from the Jody Sue Kelly training that gets around customer-centered design and asset-based approach. This is really helping to kind of determine some of that motivation up front. So we can see, and the customer, I know somebody said the customer might not know this. That's true, they might not know. Some of them might know. But if they don't know, this could be a leading question to get them to start thinking about that, to really drill into the motivation. So when things maybe get hard or the customer is feeling discouraged, we can come back to like the motivation behind why they wanted to do this, what is gonna be different for them, better for them, what is driving them to do this. So a majority we had yes, it wasn't as high as some of our other ones, but this is really centered around motivational question for the customer and not only knowing what they want to do, but the motivation behind it so that we can use that to help them along. The next question, are you facing any challenges that make it hard for you to reach your goals? 93% said yes, that they wanted this question. So we'll be going through that, or I'm sorry, we'll be adding that. The other questions noted, why did you choose this field to work in as your goal? Um, I have these noted to go over with the state. Some of these might be more appropriate as we get into deeper assessments. We'll be doing a training assessment. I know this one's not necessarily training related, but we've also talked about future iterations doing like an employment kind of assessment where if they're more focused on employment than training, we can get into some of that. Or maybe they're focused on employment and training and can do both. But I do have these questions listed to take back to the state. This is not one that we currently have, so we'll look at that for consideration. And then another question is, why are you not able to obtain sustainable employment at this time? Maybe as a question. Um, we have some questions around the employment assess in the employment section of the assessment that I think will get at this. So I wanted to flag this and once we get to that employment section, we can look at the questions. And if we feel like this still isn't getting hit or there is a need for this, we could look at adding that there. And then somebody said just a catch-all question, and we will have a catch-all question at the end of all of the different pages that get at, hold on one second, I'm going to, sorry about that. Um, it's going to be an open-ended question like what else about your employment history or what else about your legal needs or health needs, depending on the section that it'll change. But what else about your blank should we know so that we can plan in a way that works best for you? And then just career planner notes and observations. So if there's anything else you note that they don't specifically say but want to note, we'll have those sections at the bottom of all the pages. I just made these red because I needed to change the text and it's just letting me know I changed it. I'll go back and make all those black um, once I get them changed across the board. Any questions or comments on the goal section before we move into education history? All right. We had 50% say yes, that we should include the question, what are some things you enjoyed in school and felt confident in? The feedback on that was positive, or was giving some insight into ways that we might ask some of this. Um, Not sure if a career planner would be able to do anything with this. Um, this question was kind of meant to allow the customer to talk about things in school they enjoyed or they felt confident in, so we know their stronger areas. And it was kind of uh, a, there's two questions. The other one was the positive, like what did you like about school and what were you good in, and then what were some things you did not like about school and maybe struggled in. So the pro and con kind of question. This was 87% of people said, yes, we should have this. We don't really want to just ask all negative questions. So, like, what was hard for school? What was hard for, like, you guys kind of understand what I'm saying. So, we try to think not only are we going to ask them about, like, what was hard or what are your weaknesses, but to be customer centered and understand the full picture and be able to play off their strengths, learn and ask about those as well. This question on the previous screen, question 5, if this is a general introductory sort of level assessment questionnaire, then I think it works. It opens the door to help identify any other challenges or barriers to employment or even maintaining self-sufficiency, lacks of transportation, housing, difficulty paying for utilities. These could all be barriers that might need to be addressed before getting to training, employability, skill barriers, etc. Yeah, so the getting started assessment, and I think it's great that you brought this up, and I do want to frame this up. Um, Let me jump back here. The getting started assessment is completed after a customer, adult or dislocated customer, is determined eligible and certified. The getting started assessment will replace the initial and comprehensive. So we have asked a variety of questions. Those on this page have been reviewed. We have a bunch of like data specific questions, like what kind of job setup are you interested in? And they pick one. When we were doing this initial pass, we I'm sorry. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, it's your
Yes.
mirror.
Okay,
You're still seeing it
perfect.
now, Barbie.
Um, we weren't asking enough open-ended questions to get at the comprehensive portion of the comprehensive assessment requirement. So we're adding some additional questions onto this. And then for youth, obviously, they can do that assessment during eligibility certification. And while building the career plan. So their flow is a little different, but the same concept of this getting started assessment is going to replace the initial and comprehensive assessments that are being done. This should cover that. So when we're looking at these question sets and the questions we're asking and the way in which we're asking them, we want to make sure from the local perspective, you feel like by completing this getting started assessment, you've collected the kind of information you would need to say that you have done an initial and comprehensive assessment with the customer. Does anybody have any questions on that part before we jump back to kind of looking at these open-ended questions that get at the kind of the comprehensive area of the assessing? Okay. And so with this information that we're collecting here in this getting started assessment, we want to be able to then use this to start building a career plan by identifying information here can help us build those goals and objectives and understand service needs. We'll also have a training assessment. So if they're going into training, there's going to be another training assessment that will dig deeper into their training specific needs. Um, so again, for education history, what are some things you enjoyed in school and felt confident in? Is there anything you did not like about school, or were there any subjects you struggled with? If so, would you mind sharing more about that? 87.5% said yes, so we'll have those. Um, have you thought about what kind of training or school you might help you move forward towards your goal? 81.25% said yes.
Um, can I ask a question about these particular questions that are kind
Hmm.
of training related? Um, this is in the initial and comprehensive. What if the individuals are not coming for any kind of additional training? And they say to us, why do I have to answer these questions? I'm only coming here for for help finding a job. Like, is this for everybody? I'm just confused.
Yeah, we can include business logic, so we're only asking these if they have a training related goal. Because you're spot on. If I just need help getting a job, then some of these are not applicable.
Right. Or, I'm just thinking also, we might have a person that's like just a candidate for OJT, and they're not going to be going through any kind of ITA of some sort, and so they'd be like, why am I doing that? I'm just going to work, you know.
Hmm. And I'm going to look at these because we might need to consider, do these belong in the getting started or do they belong more in a training assessment?
That's what I was kind of thinking.
Hmm.
Because really, like one of the things that we are constantly, well, I'm always on my soapbox about this, that WIOA is not a training program, that it is an employment program, and that we talk about goals and what they're looking for in the assessment process. But training is a service to reach their goal, not the end of the WIOA program. And so we're constantly talking to customers about let's assess what your real needs are, and then if training is something, then we go into the training piece.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. And that's kind of how we're setting up the training assessment, is that you would just go into that training assessment if they need a training service. Then you go down that avenue. So not everybody might need these question sets. So these three questions, while they're good and they get it to comprehensive, they might be better suited in the training. So we're asking the appropriate individuals. The other question is, what are your plans for and I'll know if we do decide for that for some reason they don't belong in the training, we will include business logic that we would only ask in training specific circumstances, but I do think that they will end up getting moved to the training. This question, what are your plans after you graduate? This would only be asked to someone who is currently in secondary education, so we would know that from their previous intake. And I do think this one would fit on the getting started. So I plan on going to college. I plan on getting a job. I plan on traveling abroad for 2 years. And 75% of people did say yes to this question. Then 87.5% said yes to, you've indicated that you have education beyond high school. What did you study? And we would only ask for this for someone if their highest level of education was beyond high school. Other questions noted. Someone asked, are you still planning to keep the question asking about asking the customer, have you ever been enrolled in high school, post high school education, or technical program? We do ask if they are in school. If they say yes, we ask what kind of school, and it gets at these. And we do plan on keeping that. For youth, we ask that in the pre-screening, or no, we ask that in the application. For adults and dislocated workers, we ask that in the getting started assessment, I believe. And I think that goes to somebody else's comment. We ask for adults and dislocated workers, we ask, are you currently in school and what kind of school or training are you in? Somebody said why are you asking it twice? Because it's in the gray box too. It's in the gray box because it's for youth. They've already answered that during intake, so it will display here. And then you wouldn't see this question. You wouldn't see these here. But if it's an adult or dislocated worker, that would not show here, and you would see it as questions here. The system will never ask the same question twice. If it is somebody who is co-enrolled, like adult and youth, you wouldn't see it because they would have already answered it for the youth portion, and it would just show up here, providing an overview of what they had said previously. And I did note that down here. This was the second question that got at that. Any questions or comments on this? I can't remember off the top of my head who put this, but I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable. Okay. So next is employment expectations. What kind of jobs have you thought about doing, and are there any jobs you decided not to do? Please tell us why so that we can better understand what kind of work you're interested in. We would ask this if somebody had already told us. So in the pre-screening, there's a way that they can like note like, hey, I have occupations in mind, and if they do, they will give us up to their top three occupations. If they've already provided that information, we're going to highlight it on the getting started assessment for the career planner to see that they've already picked these. And we won't ask this question because they've already told us that they have picked some. There's a lot of positive comments around adding this. It was a little bit lower on it wasn't an 80 or a 90% yes, but majority yes, that this question should be included. And we will provide some guidance around these too. We want to kind of come back and look at like info bubble prompts for all of these that can be used for the career planner to explain like the purpose of this. And then also like there was a question, I think one of our first questions, we've talked about doing this. We obviously are really focused on getting like the core requirements out, like defined so that we can get these assessments going, but want to come back and provide more context. So and one of the things we talked about is like this question, like an info bubble for the career planner, like this question helps determine the motivation for a customer. If a customer is unsure how to answer this, like they're like, I don't know. Here are some other prompts that you could give them to think about how their training or education might make things different. And then have a couple extra prompts there that if a customer is not sure how to answer some of these, they could continue to engage that to fill that question in. So there's areas like here too, somebody said like, I don't know, why would we need to know what they were? Like this question can help you determine things that they like to do and things maybe they're absolutely not interested in. So if we're like, they tell us they're ruling out jobs for a specific reason, and then they pick a job that maybe has some similar things they said they're not interested in because of other jobs, we can kind of have those conversations or at least flag that information. So again, info bubbles, I know there's comments and questions in here, and we want to make sure that folks aren't having questions that they think there's no purpose to, and giving the purpose why we're asking these to the career planners so that they can fully use this this getting started assessment to serve the customer and not feel like they're asking unnecessary questions. Um, w- uh, Rory asked, will an adult or dislocated worker customer have already indicated on the pre-screening or the application form what their highest level of education is? Yes, we do get the highest level of education for everybody.
Thanks. I saw it in the gray box, but then like you would move when we moved the screen down to the question, I was like, wait, I think was that one of the ones that was in the gray box? So I just yeah, and now I see it. Thanks.
Yep. Um, then the next section is employment history. So here are where we have some that are pretty split that I want to talk a little bit more about. This one, I think, so I'm interested in learning a little bit more about your work history. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you did and how it ended? Some of the comments, we had a couple comments that, hey, we're already asking this, but let me pull this back up. We're not. So that's kind of what this question was getting at. When we have folks add an employment record, we're getting their employer name, job title, start date, end date, employer address. Some of this is optional. Um, I think the zip code we were going to require. Um, Hours worked per week and wages, but we're not asking for their skills or reasons for leaving for every single job record. So that is why we kind of added in a more open question where they could talk about their job skills and reasons for leaving past employment. So with that in mind, I don't know if that bumps this yes up more or if people have other thoughts. A lot of folks had said no because this was a duplicative question, but it will not be a duplicative question. We're not asking anywhere else about their previous, like, what did you do at the previous job and why did you leave it? Do you think this, with that in mind, would be a pertinent question to ask to better understand the things they have done at past employment and why they've left them? And you guys can type in the chat yes, no, or if you have any questions or additional comments. I'm going to give everybody like a minute or two to get your information in the chat. No, there will not be I'll pull that up. There is not a job duties open text field or reasons for leaving text field currently in what we have.
And
The reason,
will
go
there
ahead.
be only one? I'm sorry, would there be only one work history per se, or is this like an employment record that's tied to an assessment? Um,
Uh,
and the reason we ask here is that there's and it might be something that's more like I might be more in the minority and not the majority on this, but for a lot of our like reporting, tracking outcomes questions we get from about training, programs that people get training related jobs, where you're trying to report outcomes performance to, the boards or just for WIO reporting. Believe me, I hate to ask career planners to do, like one more task, more work, but it's already been in IWDS that field, but we so often get staff and often it's because they the customer, the participant, doesn't maintain contact as we unfortunately we've all experienced that to varying degrees. And, you had to find the job record, in IBIZ or when wages are posted, or maybe they just send you a quick email, but then they're not following up telling you what they did. And, very often the job title kind of will, or where they're working, if it's a healthcare training and you see that they're employed now at an infusion center or a hospital, and they're probably an LPN, and then you kind of know what their duties are. But there are also times where it just either in the work history you take before we serve them, and then the employment record when they exit, where if the job title doesn't necessarily tell us exactly what they did, it could be some weird type of title. So in confirming whether it's was the job training related, what occupation or industry, occupation ONET code should be assigned to that. Like I said, I'm probably more like splitting hairs, as they say, getting too detailed, but we kind of like having the duties field if it's optional and our staff doesn't fill it out. I guess and I guess it's like, we showed him, so be it, but if that's something they're still considering, I would, and again, I'm sorry, that's off topic, but I would vote yes for a job description box.
Yeah, so we'll have different modals for collecting past work records and employment they get during program participation. So for the past work records, we were trying to minimize unnecessary data entry, of them having to give us tons of stuff when we're typically getting like their resumes and we're just kind of trying to understand employment records. But if you guys think that no, we need to have, um, instead of having an overarching question where they tell us about their previous work history, job duties, and reasons for leaving, if you think that needs to be added to every single employment record, um, I can take that back to the state. That's kind of a question to you guys from the local field. What is more helpful for past work history? Because we will have a much different conversation when we're looking at collecting work they get during program participation, because we know that's tied to outcomes and stuff.
If
Oh,
we're
okay. I
if
see.
we're asking a bunch of questions regarding their employment in the uh, assessment piece, then I don't think it's necessary to add it here for the past employment.
Okay.
The only
Uh,
thing I would say is, like it is currently, um, would there be for past work history, will there be like a reason for leaving, layoff, if it happens to be a debts, a dislocation event or something like that, would there be, or is that like in the application, not necessarily
Yeah,
the
that's in the
customer knows?
application.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
we would pull that. We would already have that dislocation job, and we would pull it and highlight it here, and could just auto populate it
Oh, good.
here.
Okay.
But it's going to have different data points than um,
Oh,
regular past
I
work
see now.
history, because we have all these other things.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know like I mean, I knew it would still be collected. I just couldn't remember where. So sorry about that.
No,
But
no,
what,
that's perfect.
but my question would be, if we put in this information, isn't this going to be carry over into all of these fields instead of always had to type in something? Is the system set up whatever they started off with employment, those stuff be carry over? And then another thing, the description, what they doing and stuff. I'm one that would ask these, run a report. Let's see if this field is really being filled out on a state level, and what the percentage is, because part of it is the case managers already got a lot to do, and it seems like we're trying to fine tune things to a point where how is all of that information going to help the participant get a job or go into training? What is the outcome we're trying to get with all of this information? And keep in mind now, an average time for a career advisor is almost about an hour working with a client just to get the information in. So now you got to look at how much client they will be able to see in a day or a week or stuff. And this could be helpful if they start putting in stuff. Is it going to just be carry over and into the field that is required? Just want to hear what everybody thought about that.
Robert, you bring up a good point because we, as always, has really focused a lot of energy putting a lot of stuff into the system on initially, always, and it leaves for less time to work with the customers later on because we're constantly adding more and more information in at the front end. And that has been an issue for many, many years. So
Absolutely.
you're putting a lot of this information in. Is the staff just putting it in as just data points, and then they're not even using that information moving forward? Or are they using it to really serve that customer? There's that fine line that I don't know, I think we have to figure out, because that has been an issue throughout many decades, It's always all this information added and less time for the staff to actually do what we really want them to do, is that quality customer service and quality helping them with their employment plan and carrying that out.
And I think one of the things we were trying to do by strip it out as like another field in a record data entry modal is we want to make it a conversation. Like, how is this information relevant? And let's talk about it a little bit more instead of just have them type in a bunch of data into every job record and it just gets, saved as, 3 job records. So we that was our intent from removing the job description modal out of every job record that they put in, and the reason for leaving out of that as well, and moving it to a more open-ended question that they could have a conversation with the customer and learn that they've left the job consistently because I just can't find somebody to watch my kid and how to leave. Like I couldn't maintain reliable childcare, or maybe they just left because they just kept getting promoted or finding better jobs. But it's more of a conversation than just stagnant data tied to a record. But again, we want to make sure that's going to work for you all as well, and we can look and see if IWDS has the bandwidth to pull data from the system on how many employment histories actually have data in the job description fields to see the usage on that. Does anybody else have any other thoughts or comments on this? I've heard a lot of not necessary. How is this going to help? We need to know how is this going to help the participant in the long run? If we do look at adding that back to the job history stuff. Anything else here I should note before we take a closer look at this with the state? All right. 56% people said no to the question, can you share a time when you worked really well with someone and got something done together? Also, can you tell about a time when you didn't agree at work with someone? What happened and how did you work it out? So I'll again take this to the state, but a lot of people had said no, that they didn't think this question was necessary. And most of the comments we got were either kind of neutral or not a fan of the question. We did get a little positive here, so I'll take that back to them for them to kind of review. And if we have other questions on that, we'll come back to you. But does anybody want to add anything else to the decision to not include this one on the getting started assessment? Um, like the previous question, I feel that it wouldn't be more of a supportive question. This is there's a question to see if there's any other questions we should add. I wasn't really following this comment. I'm not sure if the person who left it's on the call. If not, I can follow up with them directly. Any context to this if that person's on the call? Help identify the strengths of the customer and what the career planner can focus on. And this again is the employment history. So we can look at that possibly if they are doing mock interview services, but not sure if necessary otherwise. So we do have a question that we added. Where did we add We added a question somewhere. I need to find it. That gets at types of, maybe I added it. Hold on one second. But the question gets at types of like employment training services they might need. And I know one of them is like assistance with like updating a resume, mock interviewing. So we do have a question around that, but it's less of an open question, more of like, here's options and they can pick a box with an other. So we do have a question similar to this one, that kind of gets at like mock interviewing and stuff like that. Um, Background info on career pathway selections and a positive association for referencing employment. I wasn't following this one either. I can see if I can. I have in the Survey Monkey to help me figure out who answered them. But if you're on the call and you put that in and want to give more information, that would be great. If not, we'll send out emails. Or if anybody thinks they understand what this is getting at. Somebody also noted encouragement, positive assessment of previous work can lead into positive interactions and conversations about what the next steps in the career plan is. We want the client to feel as though we are coming alongside for a positive change, not emphasizing places they struggled or failed in their minds. And I think that is a really great point. We do want this to be customer centered and asset based. We don't want to ask a bunch of questions about what was hard, what did you struggle with. We have been working really hard of doing, if we're going to ask some kind of negative type of question where we might be asking about time they didn't do well or struggled, we also want to talk about their strengths too. We don't want to just focus on the weaknesses. So that's something that we want to make sure we're doing throughout the system. And if you feel like there's a question or something that could maybe have a positive included with it, so it's not like a wholly negative question, we want to make sure we're doing that as well. So again, these other questions noted, we're reviewing those with the state when we go back to them with this feedback. This was another question that was pretty split. We did reword this one from our first survey to our second survey. The first wording did seem more negative than it needed to be. And what we're really wanting to get at is if they're aware of things currently, we know things might change or random things come up, but if they're aware of reasons they might have to miss work, that we can help work with them ahead of time to curb that instead of get into the middle of it and then realize it's a reason. So this is, we're trying to plan to help them be successful. We're not trying to make them feel bad or weed them out of the program, but be proactive instead of reactive. And the question is, sometimes people have to miss work. Did missing work ever affect your past employment? If so, can you tell me a little bit more about that so we can figure out how to support you in the future? And if the business logic, it would be if they've never had a job before, we're not going to ask that. But this question was pretty split. So I want to open this up to the group to see how useful this would be from a local level to try to elevate this now, still being customer centered and asset based, so that we can try to come up with a plan or provide services ahead of time for employment or training related needs that could help them be successful. Do you guys think this should be a question we include or not? And I would really love everybody to either type in the chat or come off of mute. I want to get feedback from the group as a whole regarding this question.
I really don't think that it's necessary to have this question, to be honest. I think people are going to be reluctant to answer these questions. They might feel kind of, I don't know, it does seem a little negative, so they might be offended by it. It might it just seems to, I mean, people miss work for a wide variety of reasons, but the bottom line is, I just, I mean, how do you answer that? If someone says that to me, I'd be like, well, yeah, I've missed work for doctor's appointments or being sick. I don't know how to answer that. I wouldn't even know how to answer it.
And I'm also say that's a kind of loaded question there too,
Yeah.
because as far as going with rewrite it, say they had a health problem. I mean, you could look at it and see maybe that question would come up if within the last year you had 6 jobs. Hold up, why you not having a job? That is a very loaded question, and I don't know if it's really needed because what would it serve? Are we going to pass that information over to the employer and say, oh, this is the reason? No, we can't do that anyway. So we got to look as far as what can we share with the employer before we start asking all of these questions, because what we're going to do with it if we ask the question, how's that going to help everybody?
We did a mock interview, I don't know, about 6 months ago with one of our dislocated workers. And in that mock interview, it came out without her even saying anything that she felt that she was let go for reasons that she was disgruntled, obviously, about her layoff, very disgruntled. And it came out in the interview, and we could see it and sense it and feel it, which was a very negative feel to it. I think if we were to ask her this question in the beginning, I think she would be offended, by us even asking that question, or any types of questions as that relates to it. We had to work with her on becoming more positive in her interviews because she did come off almost as if she was bashing her previous employer. I think that was more of what we needed to help her with, and not necessarily helping them with other supports. I think if it was a support service type of question, what would stop you from being able to attend work on a daily basis? I don't know. I'm just maybe something along those lines, but
And we do have questions like that kind of embedded in these different areas.
I
Like
just
if they
feel
need
like this,
support to
yeah.
be successful to get to worker training, like related to their health, we ask it about like if transportation could be an issue to preventing them from get there, how could we help them? Or like getting there, like having reliable transportation to get there and get there on time. Same thing with childcare. Could finding childcare make it hard for you to finish school or training? Um, so we do ask in a lot of these like sub areas, we ask questions about that and its impact on their ability to fully participate in work and training.
Yeah, you almost wish it could be, and I think actually might have captured my comment from the survey. Mine was like a little bit further down where it says about case, like maybe this is a case by case question. So, and it's similar to question 24 about do you get along with someone at work or how did it work out? Where they're definitely relevant questions, and I think you guys know that. Like, that we're not trying to say that these like, have no merit. They're very relevant questions, but it's more like it could it come up at a different time, or kind of like what Lisa was saying, like if you ask them up front, what the other's saying. That's the thing with question 24 and this one. Like I don't know about like up front, or in those other fields on the other screens that you mentioned, if there is a way to maybe map, or like this question would be like it would be prompted if the applicant says, indicates a yes, I would need other support, or yes, I've had other challenges for work, or maybe like an info bubble that comes up to prompt the career planner to consider asking the question. I mean, I know these sound kind of like probably ridiculous ideas, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud. But if there was a way to to ask is there a way for the question to come up, as needed or if relevant, or I think I mentioned in uh, similar to what Robert was saying, if you notice in the work history that their tenure at their jobs, if it's multiple jobs, short amount of time, and they're not lasting at each job long time, there would be like these uh well, boy, now I'm using a negative term, red flags. I wouldn't say that to the client, but amongst us, I would say red flags, not to the client.
Yeah, I hear
But
you.
yeah, if there's these red flags coming up, I mean, it's definitely irrelevant. It's a relevant question. It's just as a lot of these are, it's just the yeah, you know, like the placement of and juncture where we ask them.
I just don't know what the career advisor would do with that information too.
Mhm.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing I can think of is like refer them to like, hey, well, we have an interviewing workshop, or we have like if so some of the WorkNet centers, you know, have sort of like employability skills workshops. If it's if like you were saying, if they're kind of disgruntled, but they don't
Well,
realize like, well,
well,
you know, you
we
can't
got to
miss
look at
work,
it
you know,
from
like
a
job responsibilities, and maybe you could refer them to those, or if it's a physical or chronic condition, maybe you say, well, let's look for an occupation that's not as physically demanding. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
But you got to look at it as everybody is all local area doing the same thing. And this is what we're trying to accomplish, where everybody is doing the same thing. If if two areas is doing it and the next 23 of them, 22 of them is not doing it, you got to start looking. Are we doing what is best for the customer? Are we looking at what's best for us or the state? And what is the WIOLA program for? Supposed to help people find employment. That's always was the first goal. And WIOLA is not an entitlement program, as we always will say. Trade was always an entitlement, not WIOLA. And sometimes I think we trying to do too much into WIOLA to make who happy. It's not the customer, because the customer is the one who got to put in the work. So
Mhm.
that's a thought.
And I think these are all great points. I've grabbed the things from the chat. It seems like the group as a whole is leaning towards a no to this question, at least at this point in the assessment process. Yeah, and we can look, I see Paul, we can look to like a more general question around employment history. And I think that a question we had above of like, what did you do at your past jobs, and what were some of the reasons you left? I can't remember exactly. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you did and how it ended? To kind of get this is a more general one where we might learn some of that from just this conversation in general without asking if they had to like miss work for a specific reason.
So if I could make a quick comment, because, as I'm listening to, you all talking and, reading this, it seems to me, okay, so I think there's a line there where we become counselors compared to career counselors. And for the WIOA program, we're not counselors. So all the questions, to me, this is my opinion, but all the questions should be moving towards the goal of finding them employment, but not necessarily, asking all these questions. We're trying to get all these different detailed stuff from them, because when you start to do that, it's going to take 4 hours to do the appointment. Like why would you want to ask a question, let's say about, I think there was one of the questions about, tell me about the time, right? You did something great and something whatever, right? I mean, it's this type of question is, to me, something that you can ask to kind of glean some information, but how are you going to actually make it part of the plan? And the other thing is, a lot of like all the LWIAs have different resources, right? So not every LWIA has the same resources available to provide all the same services. So you know, what are you going to do with that? If one area doesn't have that resource, what are they going to do with that? They can put it in there. So I think for all of the questions in the assessments, it needs to be really focused on the commonalities in finding employment and identifying what it is that they actually need for resources and assistance. And that would cut down on the time frame in which the career planner is going to be sitting down with them. Literally take out anything, in my opinion, that borders on counseling instead of career planning.
I do understand where you're getting at, Paul, and I think we definitely want to make sure these questions are all actionable. But we also want to keep that customer-centered approach.
Right.
So we can also know, play off of their strengths and help them navigate their weaknesses and know their motivations to help them keep going. But we need to make sure that it's clear to the career planners how they can use this information and that nobody feels like we're just data dumping and just putting information here to put it in here. And we're also going to be working um, on really emphasizing the ability to refer customers if local areas cannot provide service in specific areas because we know they are different in areas, but working to strengthen the ability to refer. So we're not giving customers the impression that like just because we don't have it doesn't mean it's not something we can help you find resources to work through. So we also, I think, from what you were saying, we need to like make sure that that's clear though, because we don't want a customer telling us, "Hey, this is an issue for me," and the response is, "Sorry, there's nothing we can do about it." Is that kind of what you're saying, Paul? Like we don't want to give that impression. We want customers to feel supported in their career and education journeys.
Yes. I think you explained it well. And yes, I guess that's what I'm getting at. But then, the more questions that you put in, right, the more the career planner has to assess, right? And then the longer time it takes. If you want to try and get the appointment done in an hour, there's only so much you can do.
Right.
Because like right now, as I'm looking at what is here, it's going to take like 3 hours just to do the appointment. I mean, like, so so what's the time frame that we're looking at? An hour for the appointment? If so, you're not going to be able to go in so deep on a lot of these questions. Because if you're
Yeah.
talking about doing data entry and taking 20 minutes to do data entry as you're going through it with them, then you got to develop analyze it, then develop the ISS or the IEP, and then you got to find all the resources to attach to that, and then you got to so like it's not just an hour appointment then, it's more like a 3 hour appointment. And so I guess that's the concern is that when you have all these questions going in there that aren't just the necessity type of questions, then the appointment gets really long, and you're never going to be able to do it in an hour.
And I agree with you on that for sure because it's getting to a point where we want to have a backlog because the career advisors they're going to have to take a break. They, you're right. You got to enter all of this stuff into the system. You got to go back and forth. You got to probably talk to your team and stuff, your management and stuff like this. It's going to get to the point we're going to be just as bad as the immigration office. How they take about 3 to 4 or 5 hours just to see one person, and we don't want to be taking all of this time. And then what is that information going to be used for? I mean, if they're going into training, we want them to get the training so they can get them a job. But if you start putting 50 different questions, that you're asking for disaster. And it's not that the career advisors or the state? Is the people going to start taking it and start complaining? And hey, next thing you know, we're on the news. Why y'all asking these things? So who's going to speak up from a state level and ask why these questions are being asked? What is the purpose? Just my
And we'll make sure that we have purpose defined and we'll look at, after we get, as we identify, here's all the questions, consideration for timing. Like, is this a reasonable amount of questions to include in this assessment? What's the estimated time for completion of it? Cassie, I see your hand up. I'm coming to you next. I do want to note that some of these pages look very long, but these are all of the questions that we would ever possibly ask. And most of them are, if yes, then this. Only in this situation. We're not asking all these questions to every customer. They're all very situation based. We just put them all on the screen so you could see them. But the yellow sticky notes, which most of them have yellow sticky notes, you'll see, are defining the business logic in which they would display. So most of them are um, situational. They're only going to display if they trigger a specific situation and that question would be relevant to them. So I do want to point that out. I know we talked about that before, but as I'm showing these screens, I know this does look like a lot, but that doesn't mean that the customer is going to get all these questions. I'll do Cassie and then Lisa, I see you have your hand up too.
Hi, Olivia. I was listening to everyone and I agree. And then I wanna add this. If I'm a customer that's coming in for services and I'm looking at this and I have at least 40 questions and I'm just throwing it out there. First of all, my anxiety is going to kick in and I may or may not finish. And it's not that I don't want the services, it's the fact that I am trying to get straight to the point. So I get that if we're going to make this customer center and customer focused, then really think about that because you have to understand who your audience is when you have people that are coming in, especially what the things that has transpired, with people being laid off and things of that sort. Do you think they're going to have the mental capacity to sit and go through all these questions? Or do we just want to grab questions for them that's going to identify what the needs are? So I just want to just put that out there because if you have customers that's coming in that's already dealing with some type of, life trauma as far as they've been laid off or whatever the case may be, then we probably just want to condense this, but still make sure that we are keeping it focused around customers because I get what you're
Mhm.
saying. We want to have it customer focused, but we also want to understand the audience that we're dealing with right now at this time.
Okay. And I think that's a good thing to note. I have that noted on my
Okay.
other document.
Okay.
And there might be things we can do too. Like, I know a lot of these questions are going to be more optional based questions. So as the career planner is working through these, if they've gleaned from another question, like this isn't relevant, um, it shouldn't be something that they just read every question on the page. I might have already answered this from a previous question and should be able to kind of easily navigate around the question sets to kind of flow with the conversation, um, and make sure we're asking what's relevant to the customer based on like what is like what you're saying, Cassie, like the customer is in here really struggling. We need to be able to adapt to that, and the system needs to be able to allow for the career planner to adapt to the real life situation that is like currently taking place in the office. But not say, well, you have to do all this stuff before you can move forward or do anything else, but have some flexibility there to handle the unique customer situations coming in and going through the assessment process.
Exactly.
Perfect. Lisa?
I'd love to just piggyback on exactly what Cassie was saying because, regular eligibility and obtaining documentation to support eligibility sometimes is the biggest barrier. And customers are like, I am already giving you everything. I don't, do you need my blood type too? I mean, I don't want to do this. They're like, in youth especially, it is very challenging to get youth through the process. That alone is difficult. And then we add this on top of it. I think we have to also be realistic at a numbers perspective, because us as the entity that is providing the services, we have metrics that we have to meet as well. And sometimes there's that disconnect with, you have to provide this quality, you have to provide all of this information, you have to do all of this, but you also have to serve this many people as well in order to, there is that disconnect. And I'm not saying specifically from any grant particular funder, but I think that just as a whole for like the state of Illinois, you want to serve X number of individuals. I'm just, throwing that out there, but yet it takes 3, 4, 5 hours to even get through the initial pieces of getting them enrolled into the program. There is that disconnect there. So I think we need to kind of look at that as well. We're always
Mm-hmm.
talking about streamlining services or streamlining the whole approach in the front end, because there is that bottleneck. And we really should be focusing more on after they're enrolled and how we're providing the services to them afterwards, as opposed to putting all of this in the front. I don't know how to do it. We've been challenging, it's been challenging throughout the years, but the more and more stuff that is being required of the career advisors, the less and less quality will end up being there, because there just simply isn't enough time.
Okay. Sorry, I'm making a note. Hold on one second. Okay. So, and I definitely hear you, and I'll take this back to the state. The level of effort to move a customer all the way through intake and assessment to be able to start receiving the services they need is a big thing we need to consider and make sure that we are building a system that is going to continue to support that streamlined access to services. I know that is a very big priority for the state. We're building a service or a system that is service delivery focused, not focused on, we know the federal reporting is important and needs to happen, but that shouldn't be, we're not building the system to solely federally report. We're building it to serve our customers and get them to the services they need. And we don't want to create unnecessary barriers by saying first you have to answer 500 questions, then we'll talk to you about services. So we'll continue to monitor that. And I'll also take a look too at like, there's all those situations in which questions might display like, what are those different views look like? If this, I'm in this scenario, I'm going to see 15 questions. If I'm in this scenario, I'm going to get 50 questions. So we can kind of gauge where we might need to take a step back and say, 50 questions is way too many. What needs to give in order to streamline our ability to assess them in a way that we can create a career plan that's going to serve them, but not hinder them from getting service. And those questions might need to completely go. It might need to be that we have another way in which we get that information after we're able to provide service. So we're continuing to focus on their ability to get to service. So I definitely hear you guys. I am making notes, and we'll talk about that and continue to include that in the consideration as we're building out this assessment process. We got about 15 minutes left. This last little bit, we'll go quick. Most of these last few questions we had a significant yeses to, including we had one on learning what they enjoyed most about their past work history. Somebody had noted that in a previous comment about other questions to include or something like that, about like what are some things that they liked doing so that we can help them, either if they want to continue down that path or move to another job with similar things they enjoyed. Obviously, we wouldn't ask this if they had never worked before. But this is one too, I want to make sure you guys, I hear you guys, like we need to have a purpose for this too, though. So we would need to be able to say this is actionable and how it could be used. And if it's not, we might need to consider if we are feeling like the assessment's too long, would this be one of the ones that would go? We will work with you guys on that though, if we get to the end and find this is too long, kind of re-review of what maybe is some things that we could move to later in the process, or like another kind of assessment that they can do after services start. The other one is we had 50% say yes, and then I had a lot of comments in here say there's another question we asked and this is going to replace it. And a lot of people said in the comments, if this is going to replace the first question, then I would change my answer to a yes. So we'll replace the original question that we have. I can't remember exactly what it is, but this one is just more asset-based than what we currently had. And then there were 2 legal questions that folks said that they wanted to ask. These would get rid of some other legal questions we had in the first assessment, or I'm sorry, first survey. And we combined we combined 2 into this one. And then this one, everybody would be asked, so that maybe they don't have any current legal issues, but if we need to be aware if they have anything pending, that the career planners can kind of be aware of that ahead of time to help them plan accordingly to be successful. And then the last thing was just any additional questions. And one was if they have any other concerns about needing legal assistance. And I just noted we have an open-ended question at the bottom of all the pages. I noted this earlier on too, but on the legal page, we do ask, like, what else about your legal needs should we know so that we can help you plan in a way that works best for you. So if there's anything else that they think we should be aware of, we can capture that. And then somebody suggested asking something about driving records for customers pursuing CDL. We do ask a question about their driver's license to all customers. And then we're going to have a training assessment, which we're going to have more specific questions for folks if they're picking a job that goes into driving or something. We'll have more questions around their driver's license and things like that. But for everybody, we do ask, do you have a valid driver's license? And some of the things they could say is that they have one, but it is suspended, or that they have restrictions on it. So we do learn that for everybody. And then the training assessment will get into more things around some of this other stuff. And that concludes the results on the survey. So my next steps with this is I'm going to take this back to the state, go over it with them, and then make some final determinations around some of these other questions. Then we'll get them kind of added into this larger flow, and I will be able to look and see what our question sets look like as a whole, so that we can determine the number of questions we're asking and is that too many, and be able to minimize from there if we need to. I also am working, let me scroll over here. We have some questions. These are some of the federally required questions that we have to ask about some of the other programs that they could be participating in. I presented on the Professional Development Committee meeting with several of the other program and title partners, and I have information out to them. They're reviewing some of this stuff to help us write questions that make sense for the programs we're asking about. So we're still working through those with those other program partners. And once I get those back, I have a few back, and I have a few meetings set up to talk with them. Once I get those back, we will look at integrating those into this assessment as well. so that we can look at concurrent program information while also meeting some of the federal pro reporting requirements that have also been integrated into this a little bit. That is all I have to cover today. Well, we'll go over the other item. We only have 10 minutes left. So we'll go over it at our next session. But I do want to pause here and I want to open things up for final comments or questions about all the information we reviewed today, because we had a lot of really great discussion. You guys have covered a lot of information that we want to make sure that we are being aware of and mindful of as we're developing the system from your guys' local perspective, working closely with the customers and the career planners. We want to make sure all of this is integrated into the way in which we roll this out in the system. So I do want to give the last 10 minutes to just open this back up in case anybody had any other comments they would like to get in, so I can have that information with me when I take this back to the state.
I was just curious, do you know how many steps a person's going through before they actually get to the point where they're receiving a service? And I don't mean like I'm talking about actual like OJT, vocational training, work
Yeah.
experience, whatever it is, like how many steps? Because it kind of feels like, to go along with the conversation we were having before, like I'm just wondering how many things to get there.
Yeah. So a customer is going to complete the pre-screening first. That's what we're working on, and we'll do UAT. We still have a few things we're working on here, but they're going to complete the pre-screening, which I UAT'd consistently with the state. Yesterday, we had 45-minute sessions, and they also had to fill out hold on, I have them all sitting in paper stacks right next to me. They also had to fill out a 62 question survey. Okay, so we had them answer a lot of questions, but on average, I was having folks complete this pre-screening anywhere between 4 minutes and 15 minutes. Some of them were doing, survey and stuff simultaneously. So they have this that they go through, and there's a couple of pages. This changes based on how you answer. So if I'm a youth, I'm going to see the youth page. If I'm not a youth, I won't get those question sets. These are the only pages they're answering questions on. This is just content, review, and then content for next steps. When they get to this last page, if they're eligible, this is a career planner view, then they move into the application. We're currently building this out in production, so it's not ready yet. Or I'm sorry, we're in stage. We just started on this. So then the customer completes pre-screening step
Oh,
one.
you were testing. Okay, I'm sorry. I was like, oh man, I missed this whole UAT thing.
Nope, I'm going to go over the pre-screening with you guys. That's what we're going to do on
I see what you're
the
saying.
4th.
You amongst yourselves, the group has been testing this out. So okay, sorry, I just panicked for a second.
No, yes. Yesterday we did an in-person usability study with the state, and we did pre-screening, and we got feedback. We're doing it next sprint, and then it's going to you guys. So you guys are going to get it on December 4th, and you'll look at that. But for Crystal's question, I was just kind of trying to have some visuals to kind of show, because I can tell you the steps, but I'm also trying to give context to length of time to complete each of the steps.
No,
So
that's good. That helps.
Yeah, pre-screening step one, anywhere from 4 to 16 minutes, I would say. Then application. Application is going to be a little more complex because this is where we're getting into okay, you might be eligible for youth. Now let's verify that. We have stripped out a ton of questions from the application that you guys are used to, though, because there was a lot of unnecessary questions or old WIA questions that just never got removed. So this is where they're filling out the application questions, and they're also uploading documentation. So we are supporting document upload from a career planner and a customer perspective. So if the customer can do this at home on their own, they would sit and go through this, fill it out. I haven't timed out the application because we don't have it fully built yet, but they are also uploading documents. At the end of the application page, they're going to get a next steps content page that essentially says, your next step is to meet with your local American Job Center, and that is where they will complete eligibility certification. So the career planner is going to get a notification when applications are submitted, review those. Customer is going to come in, they're going to collect any missing documentation, certify, sign the app, and then complete the getting started assessment. That assessment has to be done, and then they can build a career plan and receive services. So three steps, well, 4 steps, I guess. Pre-screen, application, eligibility certification, getting started assessment. Then I guess 5 if you want to include build the career plan. And then as part of that, start getting the services.
Okay, and you said that at some point there was going to be a training assessment in there, plus we still have to do obviously a CASAS testing and all that.
We only have to do CASAS testing if they're youth and they're not already basic skills deficient. And then if they're adult and dislocated worker and or they're going into training and they haven't met the like a way to like go around that, right?
I think
I
it's
thought CASA,
associates or higher, and then it's TABE for us anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
But I think
thought
There's
for
another 2
youth,
hours. That's a whole other story.
I thought for youth, for eligibility purposes, we can use the basic skills screening tool,
Yeah.
but then they're still required to do the test afterwards.
yes.
I don't think so. I can't answer that. I do
So
know from a state perspective, it's been flagged that we're over CASA and tabing customers. And there's
Yes.
going to be training because we shouldn't be tabing and CASAing them as much as we are. But Crystal, to your point, yes, if they're going in training, then they'll have a training assessment that they have to complete before they can start that training service.
So one of the issues, like currently in the current IWDS, in order to certify the application, you have to have, even if they're basic skills deficient based on the tool, you have to have reading and math scores in there.
Right.
That
I
will
know
not be
that.
an
I
issue
know
in the new
that's a.
system.
I know that's a problem, but I thought that with the 2.0 that they were going to make those fixes.
Yes. Yeah, that will not be an issue in our system. We're actually going to work to like minimize the need to do like there's a couple of things that we've elevated that is being done when not necessary. There's like the income calculator that if they're already low income, we don't need to do the income calculator. And we're going to try to make that more clear because there was some areas that are like income calculating everybody. And then we also noted that the Tabin CASAS was being overdone. I don't know if that is, like you said, due to the system error or just not sufficient training around that. But we did flag that as another area we need to try to help the system elevate when we already know things and don't need those TABE and CASAS is done because you've already met the requirement for that. So Crystal, do you have any follow-up questions or comments about, or anybody, it was just Crystal questions specifically around the steps that are happening. I have a Miro board. My Miro board is like much more detailed. It goes like into all the pages, but I can create like a higher level Miro board that shows the big steps, pre-screening, application, eligibility, certification, all that a customer would go through of kind of for like a visual representation of you guys of what the customer is hitting along the way. So you guys have like a more clear picture of that, if that would be helpful.
If that's not too much trouble, because I know your design stuff is you guys are doing a lot of work, and again, we totally appreciate it. But yeah, I think that would be helpful because again, might just be me as well, but I think even with some of the career planners, some of the staff, we've been kind of talking. I'm trying to keep them up to date, my director, about some of the changes, how things are going to be improved and different. But it could just be me. Like I think I said this like last time or a couple of sessions ago. Like I'm sorry. I kind of get in this mental block of which we're trying to move away from, the old IWDS and the old system, but it's still hard, So like I keep thinking like the sequences, or again, like with the get started assessment and some of these assessment screens, if the customer doesn't have an answer, or can you leave some fields blank?
Yep.
So that would kind of help too, because the sequence of like, well, what screens are going to be required before, and I think it's probably mentioned too, like some like the alluded to the before you can advance to the next phase in the application uh, build, of the customer, of enrolling them, certifying them. Are there certain screens that don't have to be completed if there are no responses? So that would but just for as a starting point, yeah, that sequence thing, and again, I'm sorry, I hate to get bogged down with thinking so linearly, but that for me that would help to have that kind of visual. That'd be great.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. I have more very detailed ones, so I can kind of elevate the big steps, and then we can continue to provide more detailed visuals. Um, it's not anything we don't have. I just need to pull the appropriate pieces out. But we get very detailed in a lot of these that we can get you guys access to. Like these are the application pages, and these are the flows of all the questions that they would hit and scenarios in which they would hit them. And then this in itself is like the whole application and then each individual page. So I can start with a very high level, here's all the steps, and then we can go even more detailed into here are all the pages and the steps, and here are all the questions and the requirements around that. And I can build one that this is built for my developers, and I can build one that's a little more focused from the career planner view. We do know we want these kinds of things for training too, so there are things we will be working on to support the training as well. Dan, I see you have your hand up.
I'll start by saying I don't have a stake in this because I don't have to do any of this. But given all the discussion today about staff time and time commitments and managing staff resources, do you guys already have planned that once it gets built out enough or almost, not necessarily completely, but like to a point where you or people can test the time commitment from start to finish with different levels of users, not just like because like I would assume all of us can just like fly through because we're kind of been seeing the screens and obviously there'll be some learning curve involved as well, but like I'm sure we all have staff that are super good on computers and maybe some that aren't so good on computers. And so I wonder if it's planned or if it makes sense to do some kind of time studies so that all of everyone that brought this up could then go back to their supervisors and their staff and say, yeah, they did a bunch of testing and it's really not any it's actually faster than what iWatts is now or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we actually, that was kind of part of what we did yesterday, and we'll continue doing this, especially as we're doing more silo testing right now. So we did like the pre-screening, and then we had the state test. We created customer personas. So an array of different customers with scenarios, some basic information around who this customer is, like information we would have like gathered from conversation. And we worked and got these from some real applications and changed the PII. So we have them have a cheat sheet somewhere, but these all trigger various eligibility tracks. So I have, in school, out of school youth, different kinds, all the different dislocated worker ones and adults. And we had the state users who all have a variety of like digital literacy, test completing these and timed them during the sessions. And we're going to continue to repeat that process, especially when we get to some of them more end to end. So this was the first UAT, so we're not only just testing it as like a final product, but what can we improve? But we want to go back and do that as we have like the final product of making sure that we're understanding the time constraints around completing those from various user, like customer perspectives and user, like career planners, intake staff members who's like their experience with like using technology. So what you said are things that we are planning on. We have kicked some of that off, but it's going to continue to be integrated throughout our process as we keep moving through UAT, especially whenever we get into the regression testing portion of it, where we're doing more end-to-end testing of everything.
I think that'll help, you know,
And
people's concerns.
the testing should have a standing customer involved. What are they doing and where are they when they are getting this information entered? Testing should have standing customers involved. What are they doing and where are they when they get this customer information entered? I'm not sure I'm following your question, Lucas.
I'm wondering what the logistics and the physical interaction will look like, and how long there is between sessions and the flow of services for that customer. What it looks
And
like
you,
ultimately.
and you mean it in like in implementation of the system, not in the usability study UAT stuff, right?
When the career planner has to implement these things, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so and I can reflect that in the visual I create because there are pieces like pre-screening an application. I'm going to zoom way out here on this. So we have two routes for how those can be done. This route down here is self-service. So a customer can do pre-screening an application, um, laying in bed on their phone, sitting on their couch, sitting at their desk, wherever. Or they can also go that route. Maybe they're not, not comfortable using technology. They can go that route and do it with like an intake staff member or in a resource room at an AJC. So this is a route through that. But eventually they get to the end of intake and they get to eligibility certification. And that's where we're then saying at this point, you now have to meet with a career planner for your next step of certification and assessment and career plan building. And I'll reflect that too in the high level Miro I create. I know we're over time. I don't have a meeting, so I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions anybody has. But if you do need to jump, definitely feel free to. I think we're having good conversation here, and I want to be able to get you guys some resources so we're all kind of seeing the same picture and flow. Paul, did you have a question? I saw you came off mute.
Nope.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions or comments, or maybe inspired to say, hey, having this resource or visual might help me better understand or better engage after we've kind of talked high level about some of this?
Oh no, you're doing good. It's kind of I'm doing that assessment finally got into it, and some just hearing what some of the other people are talking about kind of make it a little bit better for me to answer some of these questions in the assessment because you said you needed it done by tomorrow. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it. This make me doing the assessment much more easy.
Perfect.
Yeah, I have to say that I did the survey thing twice, like the first time through and then the second time through. And I gotta admit, the first time through, I was super frustrated because it felt like I had no idea how I should be evaluating the questions because I didn't know where it was falling in the flow of service. And it wasn't until I did it that we had a conversation about it, and I went back and looked where I saw on the mapping tool that had the different tabs at the bottom that I realized the application was pulled out in a different place, the pre-screening was out in a different place, and this assessment was actually happening after the eligibility thing. Like that would have been so helpful to know before I started because I kept thinking, why, at what point are we asking these questions? What are we doing? Like how do I
Mm-hmm.
determine whether or not this is a good idea when I don't know where this is falling? especially given the fact that the way we are all used to doing it right now is completely different. And that the assessment
Yeah.
part is all the stuff that we're doing before they even get to this point. And probably every single area has got like a take-home bundle basically that people come in and they get, and they can go off and do their own thing and then come back with their stack of documents and this and that and whatever before they actually get to the application. But one thing I do want to say about that is that when they invest all that effort and they come back now, when they do the application, they have the expectation then that, oh, okay, so this is the last step I'm doing, I'm moving forward. And this flips it the other direction so that they're actually going to be doing the application part, making them eligible. But then you've got this whole other assessment part that's happening before they get to the point where they're receiving any services. So that speaks also to the conversation we were having before about how much time that takes, because that could be a big issue for potential participants, thinking, okay, if I made it over this hurdle, now I'm ready to go. And then you're like, whoa, 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 hold up. We got to do this and we got to do that and we got to do this before you can ever get, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, and that's part of I want to talk to you guys a little bit about next week of at the end of the application when they finish it, we need to make sure that they understand what's going to happen next.
yeah,
And we're setting those expectations. And we also want to look at like in the meantime, here's some things that they can do that would auto-populate into that getting started assessment, like their work history. And it would just be that modal and they could add all their jobs ahead of time. Um, there's some pieces of that that we want to make customer facing to help them save time before they get to their appointment. We'll look at this text, but we do want to make sure that we're making the steps in this process clear to them so they don't feel thrown off or blindsided or like they're being drug along. Because that's not a great feeling for anybody to have. Um,
no. And particularly when we were talking before, like several sessions ago, about building the career plan and how the universal career plan will have all of these like specific goals and objectives and all of this stuff. And currently all the areas, because we have not had a standard way of doing that. Everybody's doing it a little bit differently. I'm sure some of them are much shorter than others, or maybe they're more involved than others. But having it where you have standardized goals, standardized objectives, all this stuff in drop down boxes, you can enter more. I mean, that alone is quite a time investment beyond all of this other stuff. So I just
Yeah, and one of the things we're going to look at doing with that is recommendations. So based on the data we get, here's some recommended goals and objectives and services with quick add buttons to streamline the ability to create those from a career planning perspective based on the information we already know from the system, while still giving them the ability to manually add some if the system didn't appropriately like flag that goal, objective, or service. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too with some service work that we have coming up here. I think we're doing more discovery work on that this week, or I'm sorry, next week with the state, and we'll be bringing to you guys too. Because and when we met with the state in person yesterday, the universal career plan is going to be a huge shift for everybody because it's not a thing that's currently available. Everybody's doing their own. But I also wanted to mention with the first part of what you said, like you didn't understand where we're at in the process, and I think that high level visual will help. And then we can like add like a little pen thing to it when we're meeting, like right here, like with the conversation we're talking about, like this area is right here in the high level flow, so folks can easily see here's where we're at, here's what we've done before, and here's what we have left to do. Just to kind of give everybody kind of a visual. So Crystal, we don't end up back where we were when you did the first survey of like, what is even happening? We can try to use that graphic I'll make to help set context for future conversations too.
exactly. I think that's huge. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments before I let y'all head out? All right. Well, I appreciate those of you who are able to stay on and engage in the conversation. I know we ran 15 minutes late, but I appreciate that. Again, we
No
will not,
problem.
yeah, we won't be meeting next week, but I do hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving or a happy day off if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving and still get the day off. And we look forward to connecting with you guys again on the 4th, and we'll be doing UAT for pre-screening, and we'll send emails out ahead of time to like let you guys know and make sure you're inviting the appropriate staff members to that session. Thanks all.
Thank you.